Right now, as you're listening to this, there's probably alcohol within arm's reach of you. Maybe a glass in your hand. Maybe a few bottles in the fridge waiting for the end of the day. Maybe last night's empty is still sitting on the counter, quietly judging you. You drink. Almost everyone you know drinks. And you probably think of it as a modern thing, a bar on a Friday, wine with dinner, a cold one after work. But the habit you picked up in your 20s is older than your species. Older than farming. Older than writing. Older than the wheel. Older than the first city ever built. In fact, the taste for alcohol didn't begin with humans at all. It began with a monkey. And it began around 10 million years ago. Here's the strange part. Long before anyone deliberately brewed anything, your body was already built to handle booze. Around 10 million years ago, one of your distant ancestors, a creature you share with modern chimps and gorillas, picked up a tiny genetic mutation, just one small change, to an enzyme called ADH4. That enzyme sits in your gut and liver, and its job is to break down alcohol. Before the mutation, it was almost useless against ethanol. After it, it worked about 40 times better. We're not guessing here. In 2015, a biologist named Matthew Carrigan literally resurrected these ancient enzymes in the lab, rebuilt the ancestral proteins from scratch, and tested them. And right on schedule, 10 million years ago, our ancestors suddenly got very good at processing alcohol. Why would that happen? A biologist at Berkeley named Robert Dudley has a name for the answer. He calls it the drunken monkey hypothesis. Around that time, our ancestors were spending more of their lives on the ground, and the ground is where fruit goes to rot. Ripe fruit that falls and ferments gives off ethanol that's the boozy sweet smell of an overripe banana. To an animal hunting for calories, that smell is a dinner bell. It says, sugar, here, easy. Now, the apes who could follow the scent of fermentation straight to the fruit and then not be poisoned by the alcohol inside it simply ate better and survived longer. So play that back. That warm little pull you feel toward a drink at the end of a hard day, that's not a modern weakness. That's a 10-million-year-old survival instinct wearing a nicer outfit. Your ancestors didn't stumble onto alcohol by mistake. They were selected, generation after generation, to want it. Now, for almost all of those 10 million years, that's all alcohol ever was an accident. A lucky gift of rotting fruit you happened to find. 10 million years is an almost impossible stretch of time to picture. Everything you'd call human history, every pharaoh and empire and war in your textbooks fits into the last sliver of it. And for nearly the entire thing, nobody made alcohol. They just found it. The real turn the moment humans stopped waiting for alcohol and started manufacturing it happened astonishingly recently. And in a place you'd never guess. Go to a cave in what is now northern Israel. Rakefet Cave, in the slopes of Mount Carmel. Around 13,000 years ago, a people we call the Natufians buried their dead here, and in 2018, a Stanford archaeologist named Li Lu found something ground into the stone floor, the microscopic residue of brewed beer, sitting in hollows carved into the rock, 13,000 years old. A thick, cloudy wheat and barley beer closer to a warm gruel than the clear golden stuff you pour today, but beer all the same. And here's what should stop you cold. The Natufians didn't farm. This is beer made from wild grain gathered by hand, brewed by people who had not yet invented agriculture. It looks like they were making it for funerals feasts to send off the dead, which means one of the very first things humans chose to brew, we brewed to grieve. And it raises a question that quietly flips the entire story of civilization upside down. Because here's where it gets genuinely strange. Right around that same window of time, and not very far away, humans started doing something they had never done before in the history of the species, and alcohol might be the reason why. In southeastern Turkey, there's a hill called Göbekli Tepe. Underneath it, a team led by the late archaeologist Klaus Schmidt uncovered the oldest monumental architecture on Earth. Enormous T-shaped stone pillars, some of them 16 feet tall, carved with foxes and scorpions and vultures, standing in great stone rings. It is roughly 11,600 years old. To put that number in perspective, it's about 6,000 years older than Stonehenge, and around 7,000 years older than the Great Pyramid. When people raised these pillars, there were no cities, no writing, no metal, no farms. Just hunter-gatherers, somehow coordinating hundreds of hands to quarry and move stones weighing tons. And scattered through that site, Schmidt's team found something else. Massive stone tubs, some able to hold up to 40 gallons, coated on the inside with the chemical signature of fermentation. Oxalate the residue that builds up when you brew grain. Sit with what that implies. Some of the very first large things human beings ever built together weren't shelters, and they weren't granaries. They were a place to gather. And, it seems, a place to drink. This is where one of the boldest ideas in all of archaeology comes in. For a long time, the story we told about ourselves went like this. Humans settled down, invented farming to grow grain for bread, produced a surplus, and civilization followed from the loaf. Bread first, beer as a happy little byproduct. But a biomolecular archaeologist named Patrick McGovern, a man who has spent his whole career chemically fingerprinting the gunk at the bottom of ancient jars, and who's been called, only half-jokingly, the Indiana Jones of ancient alcohol, helped push the opposite idea into the mainstream. What if it was beer first? What if the reason our ancestors bothered to tame wild grasses at all, to plant them, guard them, and harvest them season after backbreaking season, wasn't to bake bread, but to brew a drink? A drink that pulled people together, sealed alliances, powered the feasts, and took the edge off the sheer terror of being alive 12,000 years ago. Think about the size of that claim. We may have given up the freedom of the roaming hunter-gatherer, chained ourselves to the plow, and rebuilt the entire human world, at least partly, to keep the beer flowing. So the next time someone tells you drinking is unproductive, you can tell them it might have built civilization. And whatever actually kicked it off, once humans cracked the trick of making alcohol, we never looked back and we got creative fast. Travel east to a village in China called Jiahu along the Yellow River about 9,000 years ago. This is where McGovern analyzed old pottery shards and identified the oldest chemically confirmed alcoholic drink ever found. It wasn't beer. It wasn't quite wine either. It was a wild hybrid fermented rice, honey, and fruit, either hawthorn or grape, all in one jar. A honey rice fruit wine, 9,000 years old. He liked it so much he teamed up with a brewery and recreated the recipe. You can, unbelievably, buy a version of a Stone Age Chinese drink today. So while the Middle East was brewing beer from grain, China was independently fermenting rice and honey, two ends of a continent. No contact between them, both arriving at the exact same discovery. Take sugar. Add time. Get magic. By the time you reach the great early civilizations, alcohol isn't a novelty anymore. It's infrastructure. Look at ancient Egypt. Beer there wasn't a weekend treat, it was money. The laborers who moved the stones at Giza were paid, in part in beer, sometimes several liters a day. It was food, thick and heavy with calories, and often safer to drink than the water. It was medicine Egyptian medical papyri listed as the base for dozens of remedies. And it was religion, poured out for the gods. There's even a myth where beer, dyed blood red, saves the human race. A furious goddess sets out to destroy mankind, is tricked into drinking a lake of red beer she believes is blood, gets thoroughly drunk, and falls asleep instead. Humanity survives because a goddess had one too many. That's the whole arc. In a few thousand years, alcohol went from a fermented accident an ape smelled on the forest floor to the currency, medicine, and sacrament of one of the greatest civilizations that ever stood. Now, none of this means the story is all feasting and warmth. The same chemistry that fed our ancestors and raised our first temples has also wrecked bodies and lives for just as long. That hangover you felt is your liver reminding you the ADH4 mutation has hard limits. We inherited the craving far more completely than we ever inherited a way to control it. But step back and look at the shape of the whole thing. That ancestor, 10 million years ago, sniffing a piece of rotting fruit on the ground and reaching for it, that impulse never left us. We just got better and better at feeding it. We stopped waiting for fruit to fall and ferment. We learned to grind grain and steep it, to ferment rice and honey on purpose, to raise stone temples just to drink in, and maybe to invent farming itself just to keep it all going. So the next time you're holding a drink, stop for 1 second before the first sip and really look at it. That glass in your hand is one of the oldest things about you, older than your language, older than your country, older than your species. The monkey reached for the fruit because it was already fermenting. We just learned how to make it on purpose,